Welcome to another episode of the 5G Guys. I'm Wayne Smith, and joined by my co-host, Dan McBall.
Hey, Wayne. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming back for another episode. Today's guest is an entrepreneur. He's an accomplished musician and a telecom company founder. His story is a great background into how the telecommunication industry works and behind the scenes on how the latest and greatest technologies like AI and open source hardware and software are reshaping the enterprise phone service as we know it. I don't think I could do justice giving our guest's background full credit for everything he's done, but I'd like to welcome Peter Schroeder, the founder and CEO of Telzio. Peter, welcome, and thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. That's a true pleasure I've been actually looking forward a lot to this. It's time to geek out a little bit, right? I love this.
Yeah, well, we love to geek out, so this should be great. So I guess maybe start out, just help our listeners understand a little bit more of your background and how it became what's now your company, Telzio.
Yeah, like you said, I have a background in music, but aside from that, I've always been a nerd. I've always been coding since I was pretty much 6 years old and grew up with the internet. I was 14 when I launched my first website back in 1998. And I've always been technology has always been my main thing. And then on top of, being interested in music and having parents that were musicians, always combined those things. So the music I produced back then was always, electronic music and nerding out. And I was, creating own plugins, coding that. And so always been very fascinating about this hybrid between technology and software and audio and streaming, and these kind of things. So without going too much into details about the music background, back in 2013, I was working on a different project. I had an idea for some promotion platform and I needed a phone number. I couldn't find anything out of the box. So I just built my own and that was more fun. So I created a phone company. Yeah, I think that's the high level story. The quick and dirty one, I really just needed it. It came out of necessity and I wanted something that I could manage easily. So I made my own. And if you go further back, my grandfather was a telephone technician. So I grew up with phones all around and he brought back old faxes and telexes and stuff that I could take apart and see what was going on. So I've always been fascinated in some kind of weird way about phones. There's just something about it.
That's a great story. It's funny you say that. I had my grandfather was a telephone installer in the rural parts of Kansas. And when I got my first job out of college working for Sprint, he was so excited and so happy for me and, carrying on the tradition of being a telephone geek. So that's a great story. It kind of resonates with me. So when we think about phone systems like Telzio does, like for Wayne and I being old guys, like we think about back when we were sitting in our cube at our desk and, we had these phone systems with these, Nortel complicated desktops and all this hardware sitting in the closet. That's not what Telzio is and what these systems are anymore, is it?
No, I think the main shift that happened was around the beginning of the new millennium, like around 1998 to 2002, I think, when things really started shifting over to become VoIP, voice over IP, right? And it became real digital. The old PBXs were also digital and they had each their own protocol for the phones that they rolled up, but you still had analog lines going into your office, or maybe you did have like some kind of digital line out to the carrier, but it was very much an on-premise play. And then you got these VoIP systems, and pretty soon after that, you started seeing, well, why do we even put that server in our office? Now there's something called cloud. So before it was called cloud, but there was still, you started seeing these co-location hostings and centers, and companies started to move more and more things away from their actual office premise and just into a more secure, safe place, like a hosting data center. So we started seeing these products, also some open source things like Asterisk popping up, where you could all of a sudden just deploy a whole PBX as a piece of software onto a server. And then you could connect that over the internet with SIP, an open protocol as well, to another PBX with a carrier that offered you what we call a trunk, SIP trunk, allowing you to essentially just not have any physical lines anymore, but connect to your carrier over the internet, which gives you a lot more freedom on anything from how many lines you want and the applications you want to build. So that's the shift that happened. And then during the 2000s, that kept developing, and Telzio kind of came in the middle of this, and we created like the first real generation, or we were part of the first real generation of real cloud solutions, where you can just go on a website, click on sign up, and boom, you have a full phone system with way more features that you could ever have wanted from the old school PBXs. And on top of that, well, let's not call it just phone anymore. Let's add texting and all kinds of other collaborative features and things. So yeah, while it has similarity with the functionality of the old systems, a lot of the features still exist. It's very different in terms of software now.
Got it. And so what would be an example of the types of customers that are leveraging your technology and what's unique about it that they gravitate towards?
Yeah, I always get asked, like, what's your customer segment or target? And I say, well, a business that needs to communicate with their customers. It's all businesses need to communicate in some kind of way. And because it's not just phones, you could argue that not all businesses might need a phone number. I would argue against it, but some would probably say that not everyone needs a phone number, but everyone needs to communicate in some kind of ways. Then you need email, you need chat, you need all these other channels. And that's really our customers. Like we provide those things. So any business that really needs to communicate would need some kind of platform to do it. And that's what we provide.
Hey, real quick, a quick word of thanks to today's sponsor, Vertex Innovations. For over 17 years, Vertex has been building the nation's wireless and broadband networks. Providing project management, network engineering, and construction oversight are just some of the ways Vertex helps their clients. So if you're looking for more of a partner to help you with your wireless network designs, construction, implementation, or operations, reach out to Vertex. You can find them at vertex-us.com. That's VERTEX-us.com.
Yeah. So Dan, that's a good segue. And so you're serving companies in 30 countries, which means that, with your solution is super scalable, right? I imagine. And so, for here in the US, what we've seen over the last few years is the push away just into the mobile wireless environment. Like I think we still do in some of our offices, we still have meeting centers that are set up with conference rooms but we're using other tools such as our wireless plans and Slack and other communication platforms. Kind of, tell us the difference in, where are the differences?
Yeah, I would say things are changing again. Like I was touching on the big change that happened around 2000. That's happening against times 3 right now. Things are going from being phone service or phone and text to being everything. And that's really because the customer's preferences are, or the end user, the consumers, their preferences are changing. And they are demanding to be able to contact or talk to their vendors or the businesses they buy from in the way they prefer themselves, their own personal preference. So I might not want to call a company and talk to them. I might want to just send them a tweet or a direct message or an SMS, or maybe I want to, old school, I want to send them a letter. But I want to contact them the way I want, and I want them to respond to me at that place, and I want them to do it right now. And a really good example is actually myself. I was buying a new car half a year ago or so, and I was deciding between 2 brands. Cars are very similar. I found 2 that I liked, and they were pretty much the same car. It's just 2 different brands. And I had gone test driven one of them. I had decided on that one. I was actually good to sign. So just had one question about the engine in there and what would it cost to get the one model bigger engine. So I sent an email to that guy, to the dealer that helped me test drive it. And I had a business card that he gave me when we left the dealership. And I sent him an email asking, hey, what's the price for the upgrade? And I didn't hear anything back. And then 2 weeks later, I had bought a car from the other brand. I got an email back from him saying, oh, sorry, your email somehow got lost or something. Here, do you still need the information? And I'm like, no, I already bought another car. So you lost a sale right there just because you didn't check your email or whatever it was. So I could have called him, right? I had his business card, but instead I went to the other dealership and bought another car. And you got to expect your customers do the same. Like you can't expect them today that they will contact you in the way you tell them to. It needs to be available everywhere. And that's what the change is really happening right now, like since the last couple of years. And then you can slam some AI stuff and all that stuff on top of it. There's a lot of things going on right now.
Yeah, so pretty amazing. And I think one of the things that comes to mind, and Dan and I chatted briefly, is how do you build a telephone company? Because for over the years, and it's evolved dramatically, but there's a lot of regulatory and hurdles to jump through for emergency services and all of these other types of cross-border tariffs and all this stuff. So how do you do that? I mean, I think our listeners would love to learn that question.
Me too. I wish I would have asked that question when I started. I think I'm very naive and persistent, and that's why we got as far as we are now. Because if I'd known back in 2012, 13, when we started the company, I started building this thing, how much regulation and stuff there is to learn and barriers to entry and how big your competitors are, I probably wouldn't have done it, but I was like, hey, this is fun. This is a good idea. Let's build it. So luckily, and I kept going, I'm too persistent. And I think the way we did it was really, we started out easily where we started using some aggregators and CLEC carriers that could provide us a lot of the infrastructure without us having to build so much.
So not to cut you off, but let's stop there. Explain for our listeners, what is a CLEC, C-L-E-C?
Yeah, CLEC, Competitive Local Exchange Carrier is what it stands for. And it's a carrier. I would almost say it's not really a thing anymore in my book. CLEC carriers came around, or that term came around in 1994 when the Telecommunications bill was updated and the monopolies were essentially broken. And it's a law that basically mandates that any company should be able to have equal playing rights in the phone industry. So that means that if you want to make a phone carrier, you shouldn't have to roll out new infrastructure everywhere in America from day one and new cables to everyone. Everyone should be able to share the same infrastructure and lease it to each other on fair playing ground. So that means that TNT might own some of the hardware, the physical cables, but they have to sell you service to your customers and lease this to you at the same cost that they charge or that they incur themselves for running that infrastructure, so that there's fair game for everyone.
Sounds like how I understand it, being a wireless guy. But yeah, I mean, because they're leveraging public right away, so because of that, they have to then allow those wires to be to the benefit of the general good of the public, regardless of what company it's for. I think that's kind of the foundation of that logic.
And the reason why I say that's kind of not a thing anymore really is because the old days where we had physical routing of phone calls between rate centers is kind of going away. Everything is over the internet now. Is actually a lot of it going on the public internet. And you don't need to have a physical presence in every single little city in order to provide service there. And you don't even have to go through someone who has a physical presence. And that's because a lot of people don't have landlines anymore. You have your cell phones and you have things like Telzio where we provide, most of our users use either an app on their cell phone that they already have a cell phone, their personal cell phone. Then now you all of a sudden have your business calls coming on that one, on the app. Or you use an IP phone, which is on your desk, with just, again, connects to the internet. So because of that, this term CLEC is kind of going away.
Got it. So I think you introduced another great segue into the conversation. We're 5G guys. Wayne and I are wireless guys. We always talk about wireless, and here we've been talking about an enterprise business phone system, and you just introduced the concept of your customers having an app on their phone as one way that they leverage your technology. So let's talk a little bit more about that. At what point did you guys realize that you needed to converge with mobile phones, and the story behind how that went and how you've gotten to where you're at today with regard to that?
Yeah, that's actually kind of interesting because, like I said, we started in 2013. And when we started out, there was a couple of soft phone apps that you call them, like you have an app on your phone that we receive your calls on that is not the native cell phone service, but it's an app that uses the internet connection on your cell phone to make and receive the calls. But it wasn't a thing that the OSs on the cell phones really were built for or supported at that point. It wasn't a common thing. And that was because that was back when we had 3G, we had maybe LTE was just starting to come out. But the bandwidth and the latency and these kind of things were still an issue for making these kind of calls reliably. It started to get better. So in the first couple of years of having Telzio, almost all of our customers just used an IP phone on the desk, or we had a browser. We still have a browser-based one, with web RCC technology, so we can make these kind of calls through a web browser, which is also the technology we're using right now for doing this interview. And, most of our users use that. But then Apple was the first to roll out a feature set that allows any app really to hook into the native dialer, meaning that we can make a call ring on the phone and look like it's a regular phone call that comes in. It will still, it will say our app name, but the UX, UI, the experience for the user receiving it or making the call is the same as if they received a native call. It's still using the internet and it's still the app doing the call, but it hooks into the phone's own UI. And when that happened, a bunch of other behind-the-scenes features were added as well that allows us to make these kind of calls. And then it just exploded. That's when, we have almost 90% of our users are using mobile app and instead of desktop apps, or desktop phones now. And that just happened over the past 5-6 years. So it's a mix between the feature set on the phones, the iOS and Android operating systems, and then the fact that the internet is getting much better now that we can make these calls reliably.
So the first hurdle was literally the operating system on the phone being opened up so that you could leverage it. And then once that happened and you now had your app native on the phone and integrated in, what was the next hurdle? Was there any additional hurdles with regard to the fact that you were now using a wireless data connection versus a wired data connection that caused any challenges for you guys?
Yeah, so the interesting thing with that is that your cell phone uses something called VoLTE, voice over LTE, right? And that's how phone calls are made on a cell phone now. And that is really just also a VoIP call happening. It wasn't always like that. It's something that has changed too. I would say around 2015, we definitely still had issues with jitter, latency, internet connections not being good enough. Even, making a call on being on Wi-Fi. Sometimes customers would call in and say, hey, my call is choppy and it's all cutting out and I can't hear anything. Like, are you on Wi-Fi? Do you have chicken wire in your walls at home between your access point? You're like, yeah, try turning off your Wi-Fi and see if it works better. And it does. So there's all these different things that come into play when you want to make a phone call with no latency. We want to be under 100 milliseconds latency to make it sound fluent and with no like delay when you're talking, noticeable delay. And these things have improved a lot over the past couple of years. With 5G, that latency is gone. Like, there's none anymore. That's not like a non-issue. With 4G and LTE, much better than it was before. But before that, we couldn't really do it reliably. The technology just wasn't there for it.
Yeah, what I hear is interesting as you talk, and it's almost like we're in this space. And to your point earlier, that everything's converging together, right? That all the regulations and standards on how things were done are actually lagging behind the evolution of the idea to create something new with wireless, broadband, any of the above. And so that is a hurdle for a lot of entrepreneurs like yourself, is you have a legacy type regulation and you're trying to innovate to make a better, your solution makes it better for the consumer. Cost savings, a lot of different things in there where one unified connection. So what do you think that the future holds as it comes to it? Because, I read your stuff. GPDR is not easy. Compliance, just one regulation or another roadblock on everything that you guys do. And then we haven't talked about AI. And so we can't, and that's the next hurdle, right? And it's regulation. What do you think can be done, to bring these technologies faster to market?
The US is bad on this. I wouldn't even call it legacy regulation. It's so funny. It struck me when you said that, because there's a new law that just came into effect. I think it might be in Colorado last year, that says that there's now a fee per month that we have to pay, a tax to the state. The end user essentially has to pay it. We have to collect it on every available line that they have. It's not per minute. It's not per phone number. It's not per user. It's per available line. It's not per utilized line. It's per available line. And that is so counterintuitive. It's a bunch of lobbying, from the old telecom guys that are threatened by people like us who can deliver a service at a very low cost compared to them. I mean, they could deliver the same service, but they have a lot of money invested in the infrastructure they built over the past 50 years, right? So that's an issue that we're coming in with this, lower barrier to entry that they had 50 years ago, and we can provide a better product. So what has happened is that, well, let's impose something that prevents them from providing that product. And that's really what they're doing. Is with Telzio, we don't worry about how many simultaneous calls you as a company can process. For us, the more calls you make, the better, because we charge on usage, right? So we allow you as a customer to just make as many calls simultaneously as you can. That's great. So that means that because we do an unlimited amount of simultaneous calls, we have to essentially collect an unlimited amount of fees.
Exactly. That's exactly what was going through my head. I was like, well, how do you determine the limit?
I mean, we could say, okay, we know how many you're utilizing. What is the max? But we argued that to the state and was like, no, you have to base it off of what they have available. Okay, so you want us to limit our product and make it worse because of it? Like, it's so counterintuitive. And that's just an example of the regulations and the things. US, every single state, and in most cases, every single little city has at least one tax that needs to be collected individually based on where you're making a call to and from. So that creates this huge, almost an industry by itself in just taxation. And that's just part of the regulation stuff. It's very interesting how that is preventing the US from progressing, because we used to be very, very, ahead of everything. But if you go to other countries, because we operate in quite a few different countries, and I'm from Denmark myself originally, so hence the funny accent. We very much, it's been very much easier for us to operate in other countries, and even becoming a licensed carrier in a country like Denmark. That took me probably 20 minutes to fill out a form online with my digital government issued ID, and then we were a carrier. In the US, we worked on that, getting an actual C-Leg license for the past 3-4 years. And we have all of the different approvals now, finally. But that, I don't even know. I mean, I would say 12, 13 different instances that we need to, besides the FCC, that we need to get licensed by just to operate. It's not good.
Yeah, we could have a whole separate podcast on the role of government and how it can differ between looking out for us versus looking out for others' interests, but we won't go there. This is a tech podcast.
Yeah, getting a little political there, yeah.
Right. But let's go a little bit further. And this was the one topic I was looking forward the most to talking to you about. And we briefly touched on it earlier. You touched on it at the very beginning. Artificial intelligence. And when you and I first met and we were talking and you brought the topic up, I was like, well, wait a minute. How the heck does artificial intelligence play with what Telzio is doing? Tell the story, and it's a cool story.
Yeah. So I think it's very obvious what you can do with the latest generation of AI that has, come around for the past like six months, ChatGPT. And I'm actually very adamant with, when I talk about AI, I said ChatGPT, and I mentioned that instead of just AI, because AI is being used, that term is being used so loosely and has been used for the past many years, that what is AI? I mean, I actually have a really funny call recording that I did. I just recorded a call that I had with Apple. I called their support or their business sales line the other day. And that's what people called AI. I can play that for you. But things have finally taken the turn to where it's ready for real use. ChatGPT was, the switch, you can almost say, that was flipped. And we've been waiting for that. I think we registered aiattendant.com as a domain name for a product that we've been preparing to build since 2017. Because we knew this was going to happen, but we didn't want to just put something out that is like what everyone else called AI. I feel like that's below the standard. I think it's just annoying, frustrating to. So we've been waiting for it to get as good as it is now, to launch a product that can truly act on behalf of your company when it answers not just your phone calls, but your texts or your anything really. And, you can train it so fast on all your historical conversations that you've had, with your customers and your customer or your company's internal documentation. So it knows everything that your best employee that has been with you for 20 years knows, and you can train that in less than an hour Oh, and on top of that, then it will be available 24/7 in all languages, all channels at the same time, right? So that's the product that we have now that is finally ready for prime time. And that's just the start. It's fun.
Well, and I remember when we were talking about it, one of the things you talked about is it was too good,
Yeah.
right? How was it too good, and what did you have to do? Explain how it was too good and then what you did about it.
Yeah, so we actually have to make it worse, in several ways. As a phone call, for example, we transcribe what you say. So as you're talking into the phone, to the AI, word by word, we transcribe it, we turn it into text. And as that's happening, we feed that in real time, word by word, into this AI agent or this AI service, right? And it will start predicting what you're about to say. You can actually do that if you go to ChatGPT and type in a sentence, but leave out the last 5 words. It will still know pretty accurately what the 5 last words you were going to say is. The same thing you're doing as a human when I'm talking to you. Before I'm done saying the last word, you already know what I'm about to say. And some people are really annoying and they start answering. They cut you off because they already know. They think they know what you're about to say. And that can get kind of annoying. So we actually had the same issue because we're doing the same thing as a human is doing. And we can generate the response that it returns to us based on what it thinks you're about to say. It generates the response, and we can generate the text to voice with a very, very human-like sounding voice in less than 80 milliseconds. That's very fast, right? That's less than 1/10 of a second. So before you're done saying the last word, we could start playing back the answer and cut you off. So we had to invent an artificial, a little bit of delay. We had to insert a little sound and stuff like that to make it even more live, because otherwise it was just being really annoying to work with. And the answers are spot on because, ChatGPT, if you played around with it, you know how good that is. So it actually has the right answer before you're done saying anything. So we had to do that. And on top of that, the voice that we're returning, that we, generated this AI sounding voice, is so lifelike. And we also kind of made that a little bit more imperfect, if you will, to make it sound real. Because we don't want it to be like a radio presenter, perfect sounding thing. No, we want it to be a little, mumbling or stumble over some words here and there. And that's kind of where we are now.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it sounds like a conversation that me and my wife have all the time. Would you quit interrupting me, Wayne? Because I already think I know what she's going to say or ask. But then more importantly, I'm starting to see, you got your vision, right? And vision's important for entrepreneur. And it's pretty amazing where your solution goes into a company. Now they have unified communication everywhere. Now they can be more efficient by using the AI model for support. So, because there are, true enough, a lot of tickets. We run a support system in our company, and I think we've done 20,000 tickets. And if I went back and looked, we would probably realize that all of those tickets are very similar.
Yep.
Right. And so those are places that you can be more efficient. And all of this runs on, the backbone. And in a lot of cases, things are moving to the fixed wireless and 5G.
Yeah.
At breakneck speed and better channels than even the cable in the past. So the wireless ecosystem is growing, and this is a great example. Dan, as an app on the ecosystem.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny you mentioned the wireless part of it, because we are very focused, again, on speed and making sure that things are efficient and we eliminate the bottlenecks. And things like AWS, which, Amazon Web Services, pretty much running the internet today, they have some very good products for people like us, at least. They allow us to deploy workloads, servers, essentially, in the carrier's data centers. So T-Mobile, Verizon, and those guys out at the very, very last, but right before it goes wireless out to the client, we can put a server now. So we can have the stuff that generates these voices and interprets them, which is the heavy part, because we need to, transmit actual data or voice, RGP data over the internet. Those things we can do right before it goes wireless. So we can kind of say, okay, the things that are very fast to transmit, which is text, we can do that over the public internet to the AI agent sitting somewhere. And then the heavy part we put out right next to the cell phone subscriber, essentially.
Yeah, and the acronym for that is MEC, right? Mobile Edge Computing, and you're taking advantage of it.
Exactly.
Well, we just had a guest on a couple weeks ago, Wayne, a gentleman by the name of Ignacio Contreras from Qualcomm. You know who Qualcomm is, and he was letting us know about how they are now putting that edge computing in the phone.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So it's not even having to go over the wireless network anymore.
Exactly. I mean, you already have that essentially with Siri and the Google Assistant, right? Like that's essentially what's happening right there.
Right. Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. We really, when you and I first met, I was like, I'm not sure where this is going to go. And I couldn't be happier with, where the conversation went, and it's exciting to hear. And, I would love to hear maybe I'll follow up with you another time, but I'd love to hear your experience with Apple that you were joking about. Is that putting you on the spot?
Yeah, I can just do this here. Okay, this I think this will work.
Welcome to the Apple Store for Business. I'm an automated system that can handle complete sentences. So tell me, how can I help you today?
Purchase equipment for remote workers in the Philippines.
Okay, I'll get you right over to our technical support department.
Apple support. Calls are recorded for evaluation to train personnel and improve contact center technologies. If you're calling about charges on your account, say billing. Otherwise, what Apple product or service are you calling about?
I'm not calling about a product or service. I'm trying to buy Apple stuff.
Was that Find My? Yes or no?
No.
I didn't hear that. Did you say Find My? Please say yes or no.
No.
My mistake. For questions about charges, say billing. Otherwise, what Apple product are you calling about?
This was recorded 2 days ago.
Yeah, we've all been there, done that. So now, is this putting you on the spot even more? How would it sound with your platform?
I can actually play a clip of our voice. I can't say the same exact, a conversation like that. I don't have that right here available, but I have the actual sound of the voice that we're generating, where we are kind of trying to make it a little worse than we could. Yeah. So here's an example.
From startups to enterprises, companies worldwide rely on Telzio for mission-critical phone services. Easy to deploy, manage, and scale.
From startups to enterprises, companies worldwide rely on Telzio for mission-critical phone services. Easy to deploy, manage, and scale.
A couple of examples of them.
Crazy.
Yeah, this was what we could build ourselves based off of like publicly available machine learning data sets, and then tweaking that a little bit. So we've come a long way. This whole technology has really gone really far over the past couple of years.
Well, it's amazing. Tell our listeners how they can find you or how they can find Telzio and learn more about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, peterschroeder.com is probably the best. It's a very basic website. There's just my name, and then there's a few links at the bottom or icons for pretty much all my social media channels, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, everywhere. So go there. There's also a link to Telzio from there, peterschroeder.com.
We'll put a link in the show notes for anyone listening. Go check it out. Some cool stuff going on. Good way to keep in touch with the cutting edge of where telecom's going. So thanks again for your time, Peter. Great to have you, and look forward to keeping an eye on how you guys are doing.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks, dude. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the 5G Guys. For more resources and to connect with Dan and Wayne, check out their website at 5gguys.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit that follow button and share this episode with your friends and family.